Hey guys, welcome back to Reading with Nick. Today's Ask Reddit thread is a bit of a departure from the previous videos. The title is What Were the Dumbest Lies You Believed When You Were a Kid, and the responses are pretty darn funny. I know that I can personally relate to at least a few of these commenters. I lost my white stuffed dog in the airport in Miami when I was 5. It was my favorite and I was really sad about it. A few weeks later, my mom presented me with a brown dog that otherwise looked exactly like the white one that I'd lost. She said the workers at the airport had found it and mailed it to us, but he got a tan because he was in Florida. I bought it hook, line, and sinker for a few years. The tan dog is now my son's, and he's a big fan. Our neighbor's son has autism, and he had a stuffed alligator that was pink and yellow. He carried it with him everywhere for years. It would get torn and they'd repair it. Eventually the fabric was so thin that it just fell apart. They hid it from him and told him that gator had grown up and gone to live with the other gators. He was so inconsolable they eventually had to find a slightly larger alligator that was green and gave that to him. They told him that gator had been living in the sewers with his friends and had turned him green. He finally outgrew the second gator a couple of years later. I could not understand how all the death scenes in war movies seemed so realistic. So I asked one of my older brothers how they did it. He proceeded to tell me that they empty out state prisons in the area the movie is being made in, dress them up, and give them guns and tell them that if they survive the filming, they get to leave jail after. I was told that at around 7, and I believed it until I was around 10. You know, this older brother may just be the originator of the battle royale genre. Either way, he certainly had a creative worldview. That our entire house was covered by cork-sized security cameras and that my parents could see my every move. This one is particularly funny to me. I was convinced my dad could see and hear everything my sister and I did growing up. With that being said, as an adult, I have no evidence to the contrary. My mom convinced us she had eyes in the back of her head. She could tell us what we were doing in the living room while working in the kitchen facing away from us. We would test it even further by doing the "how many fingers am I holding up" test, and she'd get it right every time. So all little kid evidence concluded that mom did in fact have eyes in the back of her head. It wasn't until I was much older that I randomly noticed the crystal clear reflection in the kitchen window my mom could always see. My father was a fish taxidermist and had a bunch of glass eyes for them. He told us he had eyes in the back of his head and lifted his hair to show us. Also, I ate a dog biscuit one time, one of those that humans can eat too, and he drew a red dot right on my tailbone when I was sleeping and told me that I was going to turn into a dog. It traumatized me for 8 years. Man, a fish taxidermist. That's a hell of an occupation. I'm sure his kids have more than just a few stories to tell. My sister told me that if you count all of the stones of Stonehenge, you'll die. I still don't know how many stones there are in Stonehenge. I just called and told this to my sister, and she laughed for about 2 minutes. I'm not terribly superstitious, but after reading this one, I might just avoid looking at that Wikipedia article about Stonehenge. You know, just to be on the safe side. My older brother pranked me once. I had watched a kids' TV show, I think it was The Electric Company, that featured a guest star who was a tap dancer. My brother convinced me that tap dancers made their tapping sounds not with their feet but with their mouths. I spent the next several weeks trying to tap dance with my mouth noises before my mom made me quit. You know, I'm having a tough time deciding who would have been more annoyed in this story. The younger brother after finding out that he'd been duped, or the mom who was forced to listen to sloppy tap dancing impressions for weeks on end. That the draining sound of the water in the bathtub was a monster that would suck you in as well. A lie made to get me out of the bath. I actually had this same fear growing up, although I'm not sure that anyone in particular was responsible for it. When I was a kid, I asked my dad if reading enough books really could give you telekinesis, like in Matilda. He said yes. I spent many years after that thinking that I just wasn't doing enough. Yeah, this one hits embarrassingly close to home. I'm just gonna leave it at that. When I was a little fellow, my parents used to tell me that when you smoke, you'll die instantaneously. Unfortunately, they forgot this at a campfire organized by our former neighborhood, and they smoked a cig. I remember I was desperately trying to stop them and cried all the time, because I thought they were both about to die. That the hazard button in a car would blow the car up. Oh yeah, I wouldn't go anywhere near the hazard button as a kid. Needless to say, when I discovered its actual purpose years later, I felt a little bit let down. That the armrest buttons on airplanes are eject buttons. I found out that it reclines your seat embarrassingly late. When I was a kid, my dad told me that it cost 25 cents to change the radio station to keep me from messing with the radio in his car. I believed that until I was 14. I was in on this lie between my mom and younger sister. My sister was about 5 years old at the time, and my mom convinced her that Benadryl was truth serum. My mom would threaten to give it to my sister if she knew she was lying. It was so hilarious, but my sister seriously believed it and would get upset. Well, that one was both evil and genius. I'll bet it worked like a charm. That you could get a ticket for having the light on in your car while driving. I was well into my teenage years before I found out this wasn't the case. I'm still picky about letting passengers turn the light on while I'm driving. That guacamole was ground up guacamoles. Dads are great. That if you sit too close to the TV or computer screen, you'll go blind. I was told that during the summer of 5th grade, and then got glasses in 6th grade. All I heard was a "told you" as I tried on my first pair of glasses and was told that my sister, 1 year younger, wouldn't need glasses because she listened. She got her glasses less than a year later. Yeah, it is astonishing to me that this lie was so widely spread by parents and grandparents. It still persists to this very day. I was 7 years old. One of my teachers wanted us to write a letter to a family member or friend or someone. I wrote the letter, got the envelope, got the stamp. My mom had worked at the county jail at the time, and she suggested that I write one of the inmates who never got mail. And so I did. I wrote something along the lines of, "I'm sorry you're arrested, but I hope you get out." I even signed it with my 7-year-old signature. While I was writing the letter, my mom had left to go to the store. I asked my older brother what our address was because I needed to put a return address. He said, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C. 20500. For those that don't know, that's the address to the White House. I wrote it on the letter and put it with the mail my mom was sending out. Mind you, I grew up in Michigan and never left the state, but I wasn't smart. Years later, I went to pick up my mom from work and one of the COs called me Mr. President, and I asked why he said that. He mentioned the letter I wrote years prior and how it was a joke in the jail anytime my mom mentioned me. As we're wrapping things up, I'd like to wish everyone watching a belated Happy New Year. 2021 was a bit rough, so here's to a better 2022. As always, thank you guys for joining me and have a good night.